Hi, my name's Lisa Egeli. I'm a marine landscape and portrait painter, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my approach to plein air painting. The subject we're going to paint is the ocean coming ashore, the surf at sunrise. It's a moving target, really, to try to capture this scene because the waves are rolling in, the sun's coming up, the light's changing, everything's moving. So that's really challenging, and today I'm going to try to show you my approach. My hope is that this will make you a little less afraid to get out there and try painting this elusive subject. It can be really rewarding. If nothing else, you've had a beautiful morning on the beach, and I encourage you to give that a shot. If you are watching this as a non-painter, I hope this will give you some insights into what goes behind the paintings that you see framed and hung on the wall, what's involved with capturing the surf. If you're a beginner or a student artist, which a lot of us are because we're really always learning, I hope this will give you some tips and some guidance on ways to take the fear out of approaching painting the ocean. So we're going to be working today from a moving image for reference. It's a film that's looping, showing the waves coming ashore. That will make it more like the actual challenge of painting a moving subject rather than having a photo of it where it's already frozen for you and all you have to do is copy that. I want to get into a little bit more of how you have to think about your subject and understand it better in order to freeze it in your mind and in your canvas that you're painting. Okay, so that's today's subject, and now we're going to move on to the materials and the setup that are going to go into creating this painting. Okay, so now we're going to talk about my plein air painting kit. This is my pochade. This is my easel for working en plein air. This is an open box M, but I also have a Strata and an old French easel, so it doesn't really matter as long as you have something sturdy to work on. This is mounted to a tripod. This is a very sturdy, heavy tripod, so the wind won't blow it over. If I need to, I can hang a bag off of it or something to help hold it down, because you don't want a windy day to prevent you from getting out there, so just set it up so it won't blow away. These are the colors that I squeeze out for my most basic palette. I can always add other colors to this palette, but these are my basics. This is a permalba white. This is a cadmium yellow light or cadmium lemon. This is a cadmium red light, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue or French ultramarine. So these help provide me with the full range of the palette I need to capture painting the ocean. If I'm painting flowers or something like that, I may put out different colors. These are my brushes. I work mostly with filberts, some flats and some rounds for finishing work. I'm not really hung up on the brands. These are, this is a Rosemary and Isabey. These are quality brushes, so it doesn't really matter exactly what the brand is as long as it's a good quality brush. So I do use a painting medium. I put it in a brush washing cup. This makes it very portable, easy to take out there and doesn't spill. In here I have some Gamsol with linseed oil and a little bit of varnish in it. I'll use it both as a medium and then as a brush washer at the end of the day. So the last piece of my materials that I'll be using today is the panel on which I'll be working. This is a Clausen's linen mounted to board. It makes a really nice surface. This is the linen I usually work on, whether it's studio or plein air. So this is made by Raymar, but it doesn't really matter exactly which brand board you're using as long as you have a good quality surface on which to work. Now we have pretty much everything all in place and we're ready to get painting. So before I ever step out onto the beach, I've planned what it is I'm going to paint. Because once I get out there, the sun's coming up, everything's happening really fast, I want to already have a plan and I already want to have a basic understanding of what it is I want to paint. So that means looking at the ocean, maybe the day before, maybe for days before that, and thinking about what is it I'd really like to capture about that? What is it that moves me about this scene? What is it that I'd really like to paint, and how am I going to do that? So here I'm going to take some charcoal paper and charcoal and just sort of sketch out some ideas for how you can compose a painting. Because how I compose it is going to shift where the focus is in the painting. So if I'm painting on a square canvas, then I have to think about where I want to put the horizon line, because that's going to shift the focus. If I put the horizon line up high, then I'm going to have the focus really on the waves and on the water and on whatever is happening in the foreground here. So that sort of gives me an idea of how I want to plan that. But maybe there's a lot going on in the sky and when I am looking at it, and I think, you know, those clouds are really fabulous and the way they interact with the ocean and the reflections. So I'm going to shift the horizon line down, put it a little bit lower, and then I can have space to sort of put make the clouds more of the stars of the painting. And then the ocean is going to be further down here, the surf. There's still things going on in there, obviously, but the star is, most of the composition then is going to be up in the sky, and this is just sort of supporting that. So all these things are things that I'm thinking about before I ever get out there to paint. Because once, at least for the way I work, once I get it out there, I'm not doing thumbnails when the sun is coming up, because it's like all happening very quickly. So I've done some planning already, because I kind of know the basics of what's going to be happening. So I avoid putting the, as I'm sure you've heard many times before, avoid putting the horizon line like straight through the middle of the canvas. That's not to say you can't do it. I've seen many artists do it really successfully. But you really kind of want to make sure you're planning your design from the beginning, and that starts with where the horizon line is. Also, the horizon line is going to be pretty straight, so make sure that's straight. You know, don't have your horizon line like I've just drawn the outside edges of this. Don't have the horizon line going like this, because unless you're on a boat, you know, and you're leaning a little bit, your horizon line is going to kind of go straight across. So before I ever start painting, I want to have a good understanding of what my subject is. I want to understand how waves roll in, what they look like, what the structure of them is. So this is a good time to also do studies of this in advance of our actual plein air painting when we get out there. So just sit and watch the waves roll in. What do they look like? You know, from the side, what does a wave look like? You know, how does it break? I'll talk more about this once I start painting, but it's good to be thinking about this ahead of time, because understanding your subject is so important, and the way you understand it is by carefully observing it. Whenever you're out there, just look and notice why something looks a particular way, and then think about how you would capture that. So these are just some little, this is the way you can sort of thumbnail. You can also get into sort of noticing the values and thumbnail those. But again, for me at least, I'm not going to do these thumbnails once I get out there in the morning and start painting. I want to be ready to go. I chose to put my horizon line up here because I really want the focus to be on the surf, on those waves as they're rolling in towards us. And I'm thinking too about starting to visualize how I'm going to structure everything else down below here. There's also some interesting stuff happening with the clouds, so if you wanted, you could put your horizon line lower and just shift the focus to the clouds, but I'm not going to. You'll see I'm going a little tentatively with these colors, because a little bit of either one of these will go a long way if I'm not careful. There. So I'm just going to start putting in some of these colors. That's my sky. And then of course the sky is reflected in the ocean. Not everywhere, because those waves are coming towards us. So the front of them isn't really getting that distant sky. So I'm thinking about where am I going to have that wave break? And then what is the structure of the waves going to be as they come towards us? So I'm looking at my video and I'm noticing where the waves break and what that looks like and the designs that it makes as they break and come towards us. And if you've been at the ocean a lot, or maybe you're a surfer or a swimmer, you know those waves come in sets. So you'll get a set of these larger waves and then it'll be quieter for a while. And then you'll get another set. They might be a set of 3 or 4 waves. So if the waves get really big and then all of a sudden it gets quiet, you know eventually there's going to be another set that comes in. So if you're trying to draw that, then you're just going to wait for that other set to come in. Okay, so I'm going to have this wave that breaks. Now the only place that the wave's going to catch this light is on the top side of it. So as the wave is curling up and breaking towards you, you're going to see the face of the waves, and it's very dark. You'll notice that when you look. So see that dark? That's the face of the wave coming up, and right there, the wave that wave broke, I love. So I want to remember what that looks like. And the good news with the ocean is if that wave came along, eventually another one that looks pretty similar to it will come along too. So I just need to be watching for it. Okay, so that's going to be one breaking wave, and then they kind of curl and start to weave in these wonderful diagonals. So I have to think about where I want those to be and where it's reflecting. So that looks a little bit like a mess, but it's really just me starting to plan it and think about where everything's going to go. As I get further up from the horizon line, I see pinks. It's not quite so hot. There's that, by hot I mean that kind of hot yellow where the sun's coming in, so the sun's going to be kind of right in there. We're not really seeing it, we're just seeing the glow from it. So that's where that's going to be. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry this sky, this warm tone, all the way up into the sky. Even though obviously it doesn't go all the way up there in that kind of color or hue, but it's all bathed in the same light, so it's all influenced by it. Same thing with the water. The surface of the water here is capturing that light. So we have clouds in there though, and I need to start mixing up what that's going to be. If you put everything that I'm doing on double time, that's kind of more realistic for painting a sunrise, because you have to work so quickly and you probably wouldn't be talking all the way through it. So I'm going to be very careful with what the value of that cloud color I've mixed is, because it is cloud and it is darker, but it's still in the air. It's swimming in that warm morning air. So now I'm going to think about where that's going to go. And it may look like this violet color that I've mixed is very, very violet. But as I drag it through this wet yellow peach tone, it's going to pick that up, so it'll be sort of mellowed by that. This is the advantage of working a la prima, is you can let the colors mix in with one another. Although I haven't really, you've probably noticed, I haven't really put the paint down that thickly yet. I can do that as I go. I'll work thin to thick. So I'm just starting to put down where this cloud is going to go. I think I'm going to make it just a little bit warmer. So by warmer, I'm going to add a little bit more of that red to it. And I'm probably going to start adding more mixing it up thicker too as I go, but for now, I'm designing too. You'll notice I'm looking at the clouds that are there in the reference, but I'm designing them in a way that sort of supports the whole composition. So now I'm working down closer to the horizon. You'll notice in looking at the reference that this hot, warm area kind of drops off into that cooler area off to the sides. Those are those clouds coming down towards the horizon, and it creates this nice gradation there. So I'm going to pull that across. But I also don't want to lose that nice pink color down near the horizon, so I'm going to mix a little bit more of that. Whoops. See, I told you that cad red goes a long way, so I don't want to overdo that. Yeah, that might be about right. I'm going to drop that in, kind of right in here. And when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up into the underside of these clouds too, because you can see it in there in the reference. And if I was out there painting, I could see even more of that. And see, the clouds are changing already a little bit, but I kind of liked how it was a little bit earlier. So one of the things you really need to pay attention to when you're painting clouds is not just chasing them as they move across the canvas. You don't sort of keep repainting them. Come up with your plan and then just stick with it. If you notice a little something nice that happens in the shape of a cloud and you want to put that in there, then go ahead and do that, but don't redo the whole thing multiple times unless something really, really cool happens, which I've had happen sometimes. I'm out there painting and all of a sudden a really cool storm blows up, so I'll just redo a lot of the painting just to get that. The theme overall is you're the boss of this painting. You can make it what you want it to be. I really like that sky as it fades up up above us. If we were out there painting on location, that would really jump out at us. That's the thing about painting on location. Everything's jumping out at you, and when you're a beginner, you get distracted by that. You're like, oh, look at that. And over time, you just have to learn to kind of stick with what your plan was. If you see something really nice that you wanted to come back and try to capture, then just come out and do a different painting. Don't try to get everything in one painting. There, let's see, but I think I didn't make it quite as light as I wanted it. I want some of that yellowish light bathing up above here, but I want it to be light enough to feel like it's awash in that morning light. Let's see how that does. And part of that making it a little bit cooler kind of makes the warms a little bit warmer. Now this same color we're seeing up here is going to be picked up down here, so I'm going to make a little notation of that. I'm also going to come back to that blue and mix up a lot more of that. One of the things I'm starting to notice now is I really need to mix up more paint. I'm talking, so I'm like wanting to be a little bit tentative about it, but really I need to mix up some good size pots of paint to paint from. I want to start working thicker as I get going. So I'm just correcting some of the values here. I think I'm going to come back in here and make this a little bit darker to help set off that, yeah, that's better. Help set off that light area. And then I'm also going to start pulling it down into the, whoops, that's maybe a bit too much. It's, you know, they're clouds and they look dark compared to what's behind them, but they're also clouds. They're light and airy, and they're not going to be as dense as the waves. Okay, so kind of redoing some of what I did before, but that's good. But now I'm going to make sure I don't neglect what's going on down here. So I'm going to pull this in here. Now remember, I said my plan was to get this wave as it's breaking. I'm not seeing it right now, but I do see enough to see kind of what that horizon line looks like and where that is. And I can see right there, that wave is starting to break. It's different than the one I really wanted, but I'm getting the idea just by looking at it. So that's where that's going to break. And then that wave's going to roll in here. See there? So that wave's rolling in. And then you get another little part where the waves rise up a little bit here. And then they come down here. And you get one more wave that rises up there. And that provides a really nice composition for you. So that, I think, is what I'm going to go with. That beautiful way the wave caught the light, the foam and the shape of every little swirl. I want to understand how waves roll in, what they look like, what the structure of them is. You really see the importance of knowing what it looks like. This is Lisa Egeli. Welcome to my workshop on painting crashing waves. This video is unique because I've actually set it up so that I'll be painting from waves that are moving, just as we see when we're out painting en plein air. I'm going to share my ideas about taking a subject that's moving and alive and trying to capture it in a obviously still painting. If we take some of the structure we're looking at, if we plan a little bit and understand something of our subject, that it's really not so hard, and all we have to do is get out there and try it. I think artists are intimidated sometimes about painting the ocean with the waves crashing because everything's moving and everything's changing. In this video, I'm going to show how if we understand something about the form and the colors and what's actually going on with the waves, we can capture some of that and put it in our painting. My approach to plein air painting is to plan, to understand my subject, to sketch out what I intend to do, but then to just get out there and do it, and to paint often and enthusiastically, and to be in touch with the subject and my own connection to the subject, and bring some of that passion to my painting. The perfect fit for this course is a student who would love to paint water that's moving, but feels intimidated from doing so. So if you've been wanting to paint the ocean, but you think everything's moving, everything's changing too fast, and it's just too hard to do, grab your painting kit, follow along. Let's set aside the fear of painting a scene where everything is moving and changing very quickly, and let's set up and learn what we need to do to create the painting that we envision of the ocean.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, and welcome to Interviews with the Artists. Today, our guest is Lisa Egeli. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
We're
Thanks,
really
Eric.
excited about having you here and getting to know you. And you have a really incredible history. You and I talked a little bit when you were on the porch of the world famous artist cabin. So we're anxious to hear about that and to learn about your passion for art.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just going to kind of go back to the very beginning. You grew up in a family of artists.
I did.
Tell me about
I
that.
did. My father is an artist. My mother was an artist, and once my parents got married, she kind of supported my dad's business and helped him be a professional artist. But my dad's the eldest of 5 artists. My grandparents were both professional artists. My grandfather, Bjorn Egeli, came from Norway and was a very successful portrait artist. He also did some marine paintings, but mainly a portrait artist. And my grandmother was also an artist, although kind of ended up not painting as much once they got married, and did a lot of work raising my aunts and uncles and my dad.
So your grandparents were artists.
Yes.
And you said there were 5.
Yes. So my dad's the eldest, Peter Egeli, and his siblings are Cedric Egeli and Bjorn James Egeli, BJ Egeli. Mary Lois Ekrus is my aunt, and Carolyn Egeli is also my aunt. So they're all professional artists. And my Uncle Cedric married an artist, Jonette Egeli. And my cousins from that part of the family, I have 3 or 4 professional artists in that group.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very unusual.
It's kind of the family business, I like to joke.
Yeah, well, it really is. I mean, but it's very unusual. I was commenting to you that, you know, there are some artists throughout history. Obviously, the
Certainly.
Wyeths are 3 generations, and others. But to have that many, what do you think made everybody become artists? Because usually there's somebody who's going to be the rebel and break away.
Yeah.
That's pretty unusual.
Yeah, we have some rebels. We have, you know, airline pilot and lawyer and
Oh, scandalous.
people like that in there. But I think what it is that for a lot of people, a big obstacle to pursuing art as a career is feeling like it's maybe not a viable career, like that you couldn't make a living as an artist. And I know you talk about this a lot, about the fact that you just need to get past that obstacle. And I think growing up with my grandfather and grandmother painting and seeing, you know, that they built a life and a career that way removes like one of the biggest obstacles for people.
Right. You have no fear because you've seen them do it.
Sure. It's like it's just as viable a career path as anything else. So I think that's part of what happened. My dad and his brothers and sisters were homeschooled for a long time on the family farm. So it was kind of an incubator also for artists. They're just, people ask me a lot about the whole question of whether it's genetic or environmental, but I think if you grow up in a family where your parents, the way they see the world is as artists, then you see the world that way. You notice things and you pay attention to things like an artist would. So maybe that kind of gets you started in that direction.
You know, it's not that unusual in the world, in America, you know, in other industries. You know, you think about the Irish cop in Boston
Sure.
or in New York, and you'll hear stories of, you know, 5 brothers and their kids and all their kids and their grandkids, and everybody becomes a cop or becomes a butcher or become, you know, something that has always been in their family. And I think you're right that it's the idea that you don't have that fear, you're comfortable with it, you've seen that it gives them a great, you know, a great living and a great life experience, and so you have that. Plus, I think this is really interesting that you're seeing the world through the eyes of an artist.
Right.
You know, in my particular case, I grew up with an entrepreneur father, so I have no fear
Right.
of starting businesses. My mother was an artist, so I had less fear, still had fear. But now, You said there's this thing that comes up once in a while, people asking you about, is it genetic? Do you believe there is such a thing as a natural talent? Do you believe that it's like anything else, the talent comes from the passion of learning? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I find it really hard to believe that it's just either you have it or you don't, in terms of viewing the world as an artist or being able to create art. I think maybe there's an affinity that we have for it. Maybe just as in anything, it's easier for some people than it is for others, because maybe we already have a certain way of looking at the world, or in musicians' cases, listening to the world, or we have a better ear or a better eye, just because of that's where we've maybe we've just from the beginning had an interest that way or an affinity that way.
We're tuned in.
Yeah, tuned into something, but it can be, there are things that are really concrete that can be learned. I mean, this, and our audience knows that there's some really fundamental things that you can learn. Like, I've had people look at a painting and say, well, I don't know how you did that. And it's like, well, it was one brush stroke at a time, Yeah. It's like, there are methods to how to do this. And that's why it's interesting for people to watch an artist work, is because you can sort of get an insight into the process. And if you're a student, you can learn kind of, there's some magic, but it's not necessarily magic.
Yeah, I think that there is this situation where the world kind of believes that in the case of art, not in the case of anything else, not in the case of music or medicine or legal or anything, they know if you're going to become a musician, you have to learn, you have to learn how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, start out, and then, keep going. To become a doctor or a lawyer or any profession, you have to go through certain levels of school. But for some reason, people think art is just something that naturally comes to people.
Yeah, and it's not. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of focus. It's just the easier it looks, probably the harder it was to get to that point. You want to be so good that you make it look easy. But it is a lot of hard work, and there's a lot to learn. But yeah, I don't think it's something that's impossible for someone who feels like maybe they don't have that head start, or right. I can't draw a stick figure. It's like, well, I'm not drawing stick figures. Yeah. I've learned a way to approach this, and I'm continually learning and developing that. I think all artists who are serious about their craft are doing that. We're all students all the way through.
I believe that you can learn to paint fast, but I don't think that you can become a good painter fast.
Right, that's well said. It's perfect.
Right, because there's a process, right? And I believe, as you've seen in my promotions, I talk about anybody can learn to paint. I believe I can teach almost anybody to learn to paint. There may be a few people that not, but it's a small step-by-step process, a little tiny bit at a time. And then, you take that in, and then you build on that throughout your life. How many years have you been painting? I guess your whole life.
Yeah, I've been painting for all the way through, I guess. I'm 55 now, and I started painting in my teenage years. I was doodling before that. I wouldn't really call it painting before that. For me, it was frustrating until I got to a point where I had a certain level of ability, because what I wanted to do was way up here, and then what I was capable, what I had the skills to do was like way down here. It's interesting. My dad has this thing he talks about where I would say, oh, I'm really happy with how I'm doing now. And then I'd get to another point where I would say, I feel like I've forgotten everything I learned. And he still says this, that what happens is there's what we know, and then there's what we have the skills to do. So we learn. So we know this, but our skills are still down here. So then we work on those skills and work, and you get to this magic point where your skills kind of line up with what you know, and you're like, yay, you know, I've got this. And then you learn more, or you develop your eye a little bit more, or your expectations change. So you learn more, so then you're up here again. You're like, oh, I've totally, you know, I'm not where I want to be. And so you just kind of, you know, practice and develop your skills, and you catch up again to that other magic moment.
You inch your way up.
Yeah.
Did you grow up knowing how to read an excellent painting? Could, you know, because you were around all these aunts and uncles and grandparents, and and there, you know, you probably tons of painting experience and high levels of quality. Did that influence you, or were you like the rest of us and you had to just kind of, you know, you start out thinking this is good, and then, you know, you don't even see what's good until you get better?
Yeah. No, I was really, I had an idea of where I wanted my work to be. I knew what appealed to me. I knew the paintings that I saw that my dad did, or that his colleagues did, or that I saw in museums, and I knew what was possible, and I knew the work that I found moving or that connected with me, and I wanted to be able to do that. And it just took so long to work at that, to get to that point, to where I could even just see a shadow of getting to that point. I'm a big believer in like surrounding yourself with, or exposing yourself to work that's much better than my own abilities, so that I can strive for that and be inspired by it and be uplifted by it. Sometimes you see some amazing work of art and you think, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
Why am I even painting? You know, this is like the pinnacle. Why am I even doing what I'm doing? But we all have our own voice to contribute, and we feel compelled to, you know, create, to express that voice.
So when I first started painting, I didn't have the benefit of, you know, being around. My mom was a painter. She was a hobbyist. She did a couple of good paintings in her life, but not good by your standards, not good by my standards today. But when I first started painting, I was trying to be photorealistic. I was trying to paint a photograph, right?
Sure.
And I think we go through these levels of maturity as a painter, because what we like in the beginning is sometimes not what we like in the end.
Yeah.
You know, I've noticed, and I don't know if this is a trend or not, but I've noticed that as artists get more experience, they tend to get looser, more expressive, more impressionistic, if you will, and some of which, you know, who started out very tight and very detailed. Is that something that you think is a maturity thing? Is it a preference thing? I mean, you know, I also know painters who paint very tightly their whole lives.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, our work evolves, and I know this, what you're talking about, because I've always liked, for example, George Inness's work, and then you look at the early years compared to the later years, and we do see that in a lot of artists, and I think some of it is that as we age, what matters to us changes, and how we view the world changes, and so our work's going to express that, and it might be deciding that you need to say less, or you just need to say it more concisely, or you need to say it in a particular voice rather than just trying to, you know, I think the realism is a beginner thing. I've seen that even in my own work. It's sort of a need to develop our skills and to feel like we can master a certain degree of it. You know, we're like, okay, I can paint something that looks like this, or I can use my skills to create something. But yeah, I don't know exactly what the answer is to that, but you're right. I've noticed the same thing, and I think it's maybe just a change in focus.
I like looking at Dutch masters' paintings, especially the still lifes, because to me, it's kind of like them beating their chest of, look what I figured out how to do.
Yeah.
You know, where they can paint a fly on a vase and you can see the transparency of the wings, or they can paint a piece of glass that looks so brilliantly like a piece of glass. And I think that we all kind of go through these transitions of, I want to do that just to show myself or maybe to show others that I've figured it out.
It's a way of understanding too. It's a way of understanding the process to try to do that. I mean, to make copies. But paintings like that, all paintings, I think, really change, they affect the way we see the world or what we notice. So the fact that there are these amazing still life paintings, you take that with you and as a viewer, and you see an arrangement and you think of it in terms of that still life. And you'll think, oh, look, it's almost like a still life, or it makes you notice things differently. You might notice a fly differently because of the way you saw it painted.
I think of you as a landscape painter, but what do you think of you as?
I don't know. It's a good question because I also paint portraits.
You do?
I do. I do portraits on commission. The last couple of years I've been doing quite a few portraits. And it used to be that they, coming out of art school, I was told, you have to pick one. Are you going to be a, what do you want to be known as? It's part of, I guess, being able to market yourself as an artist. But no, I think of myself as a landscape and marine painter. Recently, I've almost bracketed those into nature painters. So I do paintings of nature and I do paintings of people, portraits on commission. And they're not so different really in, obviously they are in subject, but for me, they're both about painting subjects that really matter to me and that I want to celebrate. So the portrait commissions are a wonderful opportunity for me to be a part of acknowledging the accomplishments of amazing people and to sort of preserve a legacy in paint. And in painting landscapes and marine paintings, I get to share with viewers some of my love of that part of the world.
And your interpretation.
Exactly. It's about how I, as I alluded to earlier, I think art is a way that we share with the world what really matters to us. And we want to say, look at this, treasure this, appreciate this. And that's how I feel about nature, about the natural world. So I want my paintings to be a way to have people pause and appreciate some aspect of nature that maybe they didn't pay attention to so much before.
What do you struggle with?
I struggle with just meeting my own expectations. When I start a painting, I have an idea in my head of everything it's going to be. And I always find at the end I'm struggling with getting it to meet all those expectations.
So how do you break through?
I don't know. At a certain point, I step away from the painting. I try to gain perspective. I'm a big believer that perspective is everything, and I don't just mean like where the lines, meet at the horizon line.
Your perspective.
I mean my perspective, the viewer's perspective, the subject's perspective. It's it's all about where we're standing, right? And so I think by adjusting my perspective on the painting, I can call it finished. I can see that I need to do something different with it. I step back from it. I look at it in the mirror. I turn it to the wall. I put it on a shelf for a couple months. That gives me the perspective I need to decide how I'm going to get it to meet my expectations, or maybe if it's already there and I just didn't see it before.
Well, that's the magic of getting away from them, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, you have, if you look at something 6 months later and it's been against the wall, you see it completely different.
You do. It's like fresh eyes on it. And I've had paintings that I wasn't happy with, and just with a little perspective and stepping back, over time I come back and I look at it and I think, you know what? That's exactly the way it needs to be. I'm really happy with that. Or I come back and I look at it and I say, what were you thinking? Repaint it or rework it. Or now all of a sudden it'll become clear to me one day, okay, now I know what I need to do on that.
So I think one thing that would be helpful for people watching would be to understand how not to be so deeply invested that you're not willing to change. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. I was doing this winter painting. I like to paint snow. And I had these trees that just looked so phenomenal. And my wife walked into the studio. She said, that painting isn't great, but those trees are great. Don't touch those trees. And so I went through this process of trying to make that painting better without touching those trees. But I realized the only thing I could do to fix the painting was to get rid of those trees.
Oh, interesting.
Or to, because they were throwing it off. It was out of balance. And so, I just took the palette knife and took some paint and scraped into it. And ultimately it resulted in fixing the trees. But I think that especially beginners, we get this precious sense of, I've done this and I feel really good about this. What would you say to them that how they should be looking at things?
It's a really good question, because I think what you really need to do is distill what it is that you like about how it came out and what you think works about that or doesn't work about it. You always have to be willing to let it go and to repaint it, because if you did it once, you can do it again. And if you can't do it again, then you better figure out, why you can't do it again.
Good point.
And then maybe you do it over and over so that you can kind of gain some mastery over that. That's sort of the work part of what we do is putting the effort in to not have it just, I could probably accidentally create some interesting riff on a guitar, but it would truly be an accident, so, but if I were to really master that, then I would develop it so that I had control over that and I could repeat it whenever I needed to. And that's the same thing with, painting some trees. If you like the way you painted them, then sort of remember or study how it is you did that and how do you recreate that, on demand. That's sort of what all these skills are for us, or they're skills that we can draw on when we need them.
That's the mark of a pro, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's whether you're making your living as a painter or not. I mean, being a pro is all about, it's like you said with the instrument, it's really interesting analogy is, it's the ability to play those chords again and again and again.
Right.
And so on.
Yeah, that's mastery. That's when you truly have the skills to do what you want to do with them. That's why I'm such a big fan of people really artists developing skills, understanding the fundamentals, what the tools are that they have in order to get to creating. And I believe we have to have those, whether it is perspective or design, color, use of color, values. All those little things are really, really important. They are truly fundamentals, and it's hard to get to the next level without being able to master those. And you might accidentally do something that aligns with those skills, but you won't be able to recreate it unless you have a good handle on them.
Do you ever change your tools?
Sometimes, just if circumstances require that I,
The reason I ask that is because paint color is very seductive, right? And if you go into my studio, you'll find a lot of tubes of color. And yet, I found that I had to standardize. That, every time I added a new color to my palette, it screwed everything up.
Yeah.
It screwed up my harmony. Now I still do it from time to time, but I tend to stick with it longer. And then if I add a new color, I try to do new color charts, so that I can really get a feel for it. But I just wondered if you do that. Have you kind of stabilized on your palette and you pretty much keep it the same?
I do keep it basically the same. I change it slightly for portraits versus marine paintings or landscapes. And I have a gazillion tubes of paint in my studio that I almost never use. And maybe I'll pull them out if I'm doing something unusual like painting wildflowers that, where I want a particular color. And I have over time modified my palette a little bit. Some colors that I maybe used to use quite a bit of, I've kind of dropped. I've gotten more limited in my palette in general. Sometimes it's just because if I'm doing a lot of plein air painting, I'm just grabbing only a few colors and going out and using those. And I just find that I don't need all those colors. I still have them in the studio, but I don't really use them.
Yeah, I think it's something we go through a lot.
Yeah.
Talk to me about plein air painting. Why is that important to you, and how often do you do it?
It's very important to me. Like my dad says, we used to just call it going out and doing studies. My Aunt Mary Lois says that too. She's like, we didn't call it plein air painting, we just went out painting, you know.
We may have had a little something to do with that.
Yeah, for certain. I remember when Plein Air magazine came out, and it was very exciting to have the spotlight put on it. But I've always loved plein air painting. From very early, I would drag a few paint tools out into the woods to do a little painting, just because I loved being in the woods and I wanted to do some painting there. So I've done quite a bit of, some of it was like really sketching on location. Back in my 20s, after art school, I worked in illustration for a couple of years. I was not a good illustrator, but I supported myself for a couple of years doing storyboards and, all kinds of comps and things like that. And I saved up all my money, and I had gotten to a point where I needed to decide if I wanted to be an artist because I wanted to be an artist, or because it's like in the family tradition. And I needed to decide for myself.
That's a lot of pressure, probably.
Yeah,
probably not from them, but from yourself.
Yeah, because my parents were always like, you should think about doing something else. Do you want to be an architect? Do you want to do something else? Because, they knew it was a hard way to make a living, for one thing, and they knew that I was sort of moving towards it, like there was this gravitational pull taking me there. So I thought, I want to decide this for myself. So I packed up lots of art supplies. I mainly took pastel sketch pads and watercolor kits, things like that. And I planned a 9-month around-the-world trip. I bought one of those one-way around-the-world plane tickets.
Really?
And gave my cat to my parents. And
what age were you at this time?
25, I think, 24, 25.
That's gutsy.
Like that. I had always wanted to travel. And so I just did it. I just took off, and I sketched everywhere I went. And I kept a journal, and I would, when I finished a pastel sketchbook, I had these sketchbooks of toned paper, and so I did a bunch of pastels on them, and I would put little pieces of paper between the sketchbook, and then just the whole sketchbook, I would bundle it up and ship it home to my parents. And I also did all these little watercolor sketches too as I was going along. And sometimes I would mix the media up just because I didn't have a whole lot of options. I didn't have an oil kit with me or anything. And I'd ship these home to my parents, and I didn't really even keep track of what all I was sending. And they said they loved getting these packages and opening
Better
them.
than postcards.
Yeah, and seeing. And then, so after 9 months of traveling around the world that way, I did a little exhibit of we called them documentary sketches.
Nice.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And how many different places did you go?
Oh my gosh. I was in Europe, mainly Western Europe, and then I was in India and Nepal for about a month and a half. And then I went to Thailand, Malaysia, went into Hong Kong and China, and then down to New Zealand. Spent about a month in China and about 5 weeks hitchhiking around New Zealand, and then flew back to Hawaii and then California. And I actually had a portrait commission lined up in California because I needed to replenish my bank account by that point, and then drove cross country from there.
What a great story.
And in the end, I decided, you know what, I'm doing this because I love I love drawing, I love painting.
You must have met some fabulous people on.
Oh, I did. It's really interesting.
That's gutsy.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'd have the guts to do that.
Oh, you would love it.
I don't know. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Although at our point, we kind of like a little more comfort in our travel than I was having.
Yeah, I dream about that, to do something like that. I think it'd be fun, but there's family and kids and responsibilities.
You'd have to drag them all with you.
Yeah, well, that'd be okay with me.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I hate to keep going back to the family thing. I find it so fascinating. So you got a family reunion, all the aunts and uncles and everybody's together at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Are you guys like all painting? Are you all talking about painting?
No.
Or are you watching football? Is it like every other family?
We're watching football. We're playing football. Yeah. No, we definitely never like did a family paint out.
Well, I think you need to do that. I think that would be pretty cool. We'll do a story on it.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fun.
You organize it.
All right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Put it back on me. Fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine. Well,
we did do a family exhibit in 1985 in Baltimore.
Really?
We did. It was right after my grandfather passed away. And we had 11 family members represented, because it wasn't just, so we had my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and then some of the cousins and some of the spouses all represented in the exhibit. And it was amazing. I remember it still, but someone else has to organize it. But
so do you have any Grandma or Grandpa's paintings?
Yes.
How wonderful.
Yeah, I do. I think everyone in the family has some of their work, and it's amazing. And my grandmother was a very good painter as well. Yeah. So
we have things that we remember. When I'm painting, the words of one of my instructors will be echoing in my head about a particular topic. Are there any things like that came out of Grandma or Grandpa or Dad or Mom that every time you're painting, you're like, Dad always said to do this? Oh,
totally. My dad's instruction replays in my head all the time.
Does it?
Yeah, definitely, because it's just such a fundamental part of my learning from very early on, because I would hear him saying things even to himself about what he needed to do.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that he's still here and can still critique my work for me when I ask him, and yeah, definitely the family learning. And he'll share, things that his father and mother said to him too.
Anything come to mind? Hate to put you on the spot.
Well, the big message from my dad has always been to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's always what he's always emphasized, is just you have to feel that love for what you're doing. Among the most upset I've ever seen him is if I get angry with my work and or have really negative feelings about it, and he's like, no, you need to step away from it now. And really get back in touch with why you're doing it and what you want for that painting.
Well, I think Grandma and Grandpa and Dad and cousins and family members, all that advice is going to help the people watching this. And it's very clear that you love what you do. Your passion is contagious.
Oh, I'm glad.
And your work is beyond phenomenal. It has, to me, that museum quality. To me, it feels like it's super sophisticated, very well developed, and that's not something I throw out lightly, and it's not something I see very often.
Oh, thank you.
And so congratulations on accomplishing that, and I can't wait to see what you do with the next 10 or 20 years, because we all grow, hopefully.
Oh, absolutely. I hope I never stop growing, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Eric. It's really a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Our guest today, Lisa Egeli, and thank you for watching Interviews with the Artist. I'm Eric Rhodes. Bye-bye.
That beautiful way the wave caught the light, the foam and the shape of every little swirl. I want to understand how waves roll in, what they look like, what the structure of them is. You really see the importance of knowing what it looks like. This is Lisa Egeli. Welcome to my workshop on painting crashing waves. This video is unique because I've actually set it up so that I'll be painting from waves that are moving, just as we see when we're out painting en plein air. I'm going to share my ideas about taking a subject that's moving and alive and trying to capture it in a obviously still painting. If we take some of the structure we're looking at, if we plan a little bit and understand something of our subject, that it's really not so hard and all we have to do is get out there and try it. I think artists are intimidated sometimes about painting the ocean with the waves crashing because everything's moving and everything's changing. In this video, I'm going to show how if we understand something about the form and the colors and what's actually going on with the waves, we can capture some of that and put it in our painting. My approach to plein air painting is to plan, to understand my subject, to sketch out what I intend to do, but then to just get out there and do it and to paint often and enthusiastically, and to be in touch with the subject and my own connection to the subject and bring some of that passion to my painting. The perfect fit for this course is a student who would love to paint water that's moving but feels intimidated from doing so. So if you've been wanting to paint the ocean but you think everything's moving, everything's changing too fast and it's just too hard to do, grab your painting kit, follow along. Let's set aside the fear of painting a scene where everything is moving and changing very quickly. And let's set up and learn what we need to do to create the painting that we envision of the ocean.